One, thank you for coming up here, up the stairs or up the elevator after lunch. I'm going to try to not bore you because you just had a massive amount of food and carrot cake and ice cream. So you might feel a bit sleepy. I'm going to try to keep it a bit light and hopefully a bit funny. And I like engagement, so if there is a comment or a question, just raise your hand. I'll just take it when it comes. And there's also some time. Yes.
Are Nerf guns allowed?
Nerf guns are not allowed. You go outside, Tom. So, if you look at the schedule, the talk is called A Brief History of OT Security, From Air Gaps to Panic. But after I submitted the talk and went through everything, a friend of mine pointed out I missed the obvious adding a text to it. So I did now. So for air gaps to panic attacks, which kind of sounds a bit sensational, but it's kind of is what's happening in the community and in the sector. So this image is AI generated. There is no such power station behind an actual ancient wall, as far as I know. But I kind of generated it because it kind of shows and highlights how we approach security. And, I'm going to talk about this through the session. So who am I? So I am an OT adjacent nerd, which means I am not an engineer. Do not let me into your power station to program things, but I can talk to you about securing those systems. I'm also a recovering academic, so if this feels like a lecture, it is because I used to lecture. But I think I was quite a fun lecturer. But that's, what I think. So I often get asked what PLCs are, programmable logic controllers, fancy word. But I'm trying to not do that when I'm at parties anymore, because people didn't like that. During the day, I am the lead OT cybersecurity engineer for Immersive, formerly Immersive Labs, if you remember us. So I make all kind of cool labs and crisis sims and cyber ranges, anything to do with OT cybersecurity. I'd love to say that I'm a gamer by night, but I am one of those people that got back into classic WoW, ended up in a guild full of 30 to 50-year-olds, and we try to raid 3 times a week. It happens 1 time a week. And we usually finish the raids when they nerfed it 5 times at the end of the expansion. But we're having fun. So usually after 11, you'll find me sleeping in my bed. So who here knows about operational technology? There are a few. Usually I used to be the only one, and I like having people here that knows a bit about it. But if you don't know, OT, or operational technology, is a term that was coined by Gartner years ago, and it kind of stuck because it kind of basically just says what it is on the tin. So it makes the physical world move. So it is part of the operations. It's kind of the bridge between cyber and the physical world. So if you think factories, conveyor belts, opening valves, things like that, it's all controlled by operational technology. The power distribution network, operational technology. Ships, operational technology. So they are basically everywhere in our lives, but people don't really look at it and be like, oh yes, this is operational technology. We kind of just expect that things come out of the tap, or, my computer is rolled from the manufacturer on my car and is being built, but how is it being built? And it's not by people a lot of the time anymore, it's by machines. So these kind of systems are controlled by those programmable logic controllers. So they are controllers that have programmable logic. Wow. So they are programmed in something called ladder logic, which is basically, if you know engineers, they like lines and they like graphs, and that's basically what it is. From input, and then you follow the line to the end. And that's kind of what your program does. It's It's quite fun. It's different to what you're used to. Yeah, it's quite fun. So that's kind of part of my day job, is making those little ladders that I don't use to go over the wall, but basically go through the wall. So it is where technology meets physical action. So that's kind of the fun thing about OT and being an OT. We used to have at university a nice virtual water station with a water tank and things. I know in Singapore, University of Technology and Design, they have a physical water treatment test bed, and they've flooded it several times already. But that is something you cannot really do with cyber. Like with IT, you can, I've DDoSed this machine and I cannot open the website. I cannot access this anymore. But you've never really, flooded something, or you never really, we always had this big idea to have like one of those slushy machines, and then the Tango, the red and the blue one, and you can mix it and things like that, like physical things. And the most important part about OT is kind of what happens when something goes wrong. When IT fails, a business loses money. The business cannot operate. We might be able to go home or, go outside and have a drink whilst IT is fixing it. When OT fails, somebody might lose a limb. Somebody might die. There are severe consequences to that. Aside from, if my factory cannot produce anything, I might lose hundreds of thousands of pounds per minute, or even more. Like, it can run into the millions, depending on how big you are. So there's a lot riding on this, and, put that together with, we've been looking at securing of these devices for the past maybe like 20-ish years at most. It's really scary that we didn't think about that earlier. So if you kind of sum it up, what is the core goal? IT moves fast. The cloud, the new Windows update, Windows 11 would have been the last one, but now it's not, and they do more and more things. In OT, we have these funny little Windows XP or Windows Embedded or Windows Vista machines running, or Windows 95, is it? That are still just running fine, and they're tagging along and hopping along, because that is what we can use. That is what the systems are built for, because they were built 20, 30 years ago. One of the big PLC manufacturers, Siemens, I think Siemens makes everything from dishwashers to PLCs to, they do so many things. They've been trying to phase out this famous PLC called the S7300. They've been trying to phase it out for as long as I know. But whenever they get to the point, their customers are saying, no, we need this. So can you keep on making it a little bit longer? So these machines are 20 years old. But instead of, what we cannot do is we cannot remove a broken one and put in a new one that is more modern, has all the new features, because it won't work together. So the option to do that is, okay, let's disassemble the whole factory. Let's update everything. Let's turn on the fancy new security features that these new machines have. But that is, I was talking, who here can convince finance to update their laptops for all their, employees? That costs hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds. They don't do that. So they're not going to shut down their factory for months to update their machine. So they take it out and swap a new one in, upload the old logic, and it keeps on running for another 20 years. So we are not getting rid of the old systems yet. So how do we approach on defending them? Or how did people start approaching defending of them? Because I'll tell you here, the protocols we are running are unencrypted. They don't use authentication. And we have direct access to the system memory. So we'd say, we need some good defense, don't we? They came up after a long and arduous journey. They went all over the world to talk to experts. How do we secure these environments? We just don't connect into the internet. Job done, we can all go home. So thank you for coming. Are there any questions? This was a brief history. No, it is done. So this is how we could imagine OT environments. They were this little castle in the middle of the lake. Nobody could get there. We were quite safe. We were quite happy. We all lived together in peace until the Fire Nation attacked, which is the next slide. So what started happening? These pesky business people that all want data and information and efficiency, they came and said, you know, this oil terminal we have, there is this juicy information there that your system has about how much oil tankers tank and whatever. And we need to, it would be very efficient if you could upload customer data from an order that comes in the IT network in our ERP system, and then we hook that up to the OT network, and we know who's coming and whatever. And yeah, let's do this. So let's make this little opening in your firewall, so we can just allow that to go in. It's fine. And then, let's make this other little gap and this other little gap. And then an engineer comes along and says, I kind of want to work from home. Let me install TeamViewer on this workstation, and I'm going to connect from it, from home. Or I have this laptop, and I'm in the northern tip of Scotland. It's nothing to do. I only have this laptop. I'm alone in my hotel in the evening. Yes, and then the next day they come back into your facility and connect to your network, and who knows what's going to happen. It has actually almost happened in Wolf Creek Nuclear Power Station in the US. They were hiring for new engineers. They got Word documents with CVs, very, very legitimate. HR sent these over to the engineers because they were like, well, we don't know engineering, you do, so you might be better to determine if these are good candidates or not. Which is actually fair. I like when they do that and not just desk reject. But those were not just normal Word documents. They had, some malware embedded to it. And if those engineers then connected to the nuclear network, who knows what would happen. But those were kind of the attacks we were worried about when we were in this stage. If somebody managed to get over a walls physically into our environment and connect like Stuxnet, that is an issue. But no one could actually get to a network over the internet. They couldn't get there. There was no connection. There was this massive big air gap. But it isn't there anymore. So, what should we do? We have the business that wants the efficiency. We have the data they want. We're not going back to the good old days of no connections, very safe environments. We cannot go encrypting all our communications. We cannot update our whole infrastructure to use these fancy new security tools. We're trying to. So one of the protocols that's used by Siemens is S7COM, unencrypted. They then came up with S7COM Plus. It was, lost from the start because they didn't call it S7COM Plus. Whoever heard of C+, what happened, like a couple of months after they released it, we've cracked the encryption. We had this other protocol called DNP3. We then made DNP3 v5 security authentication or something like that. We cracked it. We all know security, after, putting it on after everything has been developed is not a good practice. So that doesn't work. And we cannot use the new protocols because all systems don't work with that, blah, 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 blah. But then when we found at university, when we found an issue on PLCs and we went to the vendor and said, this is quite bad. They said, no, it's only these old systems that no one uses anymore. And on these new systems, there's this nice little tick box that is not enabled by default, but you can enable, which then breaks your any interoperability with old systems or other systems, but that system will be secure. Also an option. So the point is, we relied so long on this wall or air gap, and that was just there. And we didn't have EDR, we didn't have network detection, we had nothing on networks. And we were trying to get it to work when we had this wall with nothing, and we had these little holes in. So you can just walk past it. So that's actually, if you think a wall never used to be like that. A wall is not just a wall. There's so many systems. Even the Romans figured that out, that you couldn't just have a wall. You have to have people on that wall. You have to have mile castles. You have to get sentries beyond the wall to see if they're coming. You have to get encampments behind your wall to know if anybody is attacking, I have a legion behind me that can come defend the wall. Because having a wall and having somebody sitting there, oh, there is 10,000 people coming. We are 5. It's a useless wall. So we have to kind of accept that, and we have to figure out how we're going to do that. So real defenses take time. So looking at segmentation, nothing wrong with segmentation. It is a good security practice. So we still have a big firewall. We have a DMZ in between, or a T and OT network. Usually best have a firewall at both sides. One operated by IT, one operated by OT security. Good. Okay. Now I should interject that many people still believe we should put 2 firewalls next to each other, because those pesky 0 days. So we have the Palo Alto, and we have the Cisco, and we have the Fortinet, and we have the checkpoint all in a line. But we will connect the management interface to just a normal network, which is the actual good security, to not do that. We look at monitoring, so what can we actually monitor that goes through a network. We have things like multi-factor authentication where possible, and we have a proper response. So now we see organizations that are connecting their OT environment, telemetry, with their SIEM. We have organizations that are doing that by creating another hole in their firewall to ship the data in and out in a very insecure way. Or we have organizations that think, I use Microsoft Sentinel in the cloud, so I will connect my operational technology environment that has no encryption and no good security practices to the cloud, so I can have the data sit there in a nice big data lake. So we are still figuring a lot of things out, how to do things well. And about the multi-factor authentication, that is kind of an issue we see as well. So the OT people don't like lots of security because they're not used to that, and it makes things difficult. The IT people say, I've done security for my entire life. You need to have strong passwords. You need to have multi-factor authentication. But when I'm in the middle of nowhere in a little field side and I don't have cell phone connection and the machine is asking me for my authentication code that's sent to me over SMS, I'm not getting it. If I don't have my phone with me and I need to get to that machine to shut down the operation because something bad is happening, I cannot get in. If I forget the complex password that I have to change every single month, which I actually just increment by 1 at the end, just like everybody's first password was password 1 exclamation mark. Because, you had to get that special character, you had to get the number in, or fluffy 1 exclamation mark, or whatever you found. But usually lots of people use the same kind of thing. If I'm under pressure, the factory is flooding or something, I need on this machine, I need to stop something. Oh, wrong password, I'm logged out for the next 5 minutes. Doesn't work. But we can all understand that shared credentials is not the best security practice, but we can do it in an acceptable way. So we need to figure out ways we can do things that we can achieve with multi-factor authentication, with passwords, but in a way that works for the environment. Somebody comes to my factory and they see the little note, this post-it note on the machine with the password, that is password 2 exclamation mark. Yes, but they need to be in my network. They need to be in my facility. They've gone through all my guards. They've been there. They can do a lot more damage than to connect to this machine. But if they get to my network from their leisurely home, somewhere in a country that doesn't have an extradition treaty with the UK or the US or whatever, probably somewhere exotic, they want to do something and they cannot log in because they need a password. So it kind of stops them from doing certain things. So, move on from this slide. Rant on this slide is over. So what do people start to do? They start installing the next big thing. There was this amazing talk at Hackademia about how vendors keep pushing this new box will solve your security issue. There was this other person that I spoke with a couple of weeks ago that says, boys like their toys. Boys like buying the next fancy thing that Fortinet or Palo Alto comes out with, and they say, this will solve it. But if I install a border control, but I don't have a proper border, I don't know what is actually in my domain, what am I protecting? I'm only putting complications in my network without doing anything. So before starting to do all of these things, start with visibility. And that is another big issue we have, because engineers like doing things their own way. And they say, I've installed this machine and it's running there and I'm now doing something else and I forgot about that machine. And that engineer has moved departments 5 years ago, has now left the company. No one knows what that device is, but nobody touches it. It's there. It's dusty. Still works. Still runs. But it's not locked. Lots of these environments don't have proper asset management. Other thing we can learn. So tools are useless without proper training. So if I'm here in medieval England, and you give me this gun, this Nerf gun, what do I do with it? I know swords, and I know crossbows, and I know longbows. But if you give me your SOC analyst Modbus data, and S7 COM data, and DNP3 data, and IEC104 data, and whatever, what are those protocols? What does this mean? This is writing to somewhere. Is that bad? Is that good? So they started giving people tools, and they started giving people data, and they were like, we have visibility, we know what's going on. But the people who are using them don't have the training to actually use these systems. So you've just given Fortinet or given Palo Alto or whatever vendor you're using a lot of money for a shiny box that you cannot do anything with. Or worst case, you have this level 1 SOC analyst that puts something in ChatGPT, and ChatGPT says, this is not good, and blocks this network traffic, and then my controller cannot talk anymore with my interface, with my SCADA system that monitors everything, and there's more troubles. So it's not their fault because they didn't get the training. So what we are forgetting, which is the same thing we forgot for a long time in cybersecurity, is that people are the real perimeter. Or people that are in the factory, on the ground, that are moving their one laptop from the IT environment to the OT environment. They need to be trained. They need to understand what to do. They need to be aware of cybersecurity. And that is being forgotten for a long time. I was talking to a bus company. Their engineers that hook up onto the buses, to the bus network, they get phishing awareness training. Do they get any training that they understand what they're actually doing on their bus network? What can go wrong? Keep in mind that, you might not want to do any shady things on this machine, because if you do that and connect to this network, whatever. No, because we worry about phishing, which, we need to be more comprehensive, and we need to kind of get the training they need and understand. And that is often kind of the barrier, because we have, going back to our medieval period, we have two teams in one castle. On one hand, we have our engineers that are operating legacy equipment with insecure protocols and insecure networks, but they're there with the goal to keep things running, available in a safe way. At the other side, we have the cyber people that are looking at all of these threats and these alerts, and they click boxes and things happen, and they're like, yes, I'm fighting the bad guys, but they don't talk to each other. They don't understand each other. They come in and say, you now need to install an Active Directory machine in your OT environment, and we will connect it to our IT Active Directory because it makes it easier for user accounts. So, when somebody manages to exploit or get onto our AD in our enterprise network, they're now in our OT network as well. And why do we need Active Directory in our OT network? Because we want it, because we can have user accounts and we can do account management and the cool things we used to do in IT. Do we need it? No, because you're not going to have your factory worker that goes from station A to B to C to D to always have to re-authenticate in every single machine, because they have a minute at each station and then the car is gone. So if you get there and the other person hasn't logged out and you have to log out and you have to log in, and you wait for the multi-factor authentication code, or you wait for, you put the wrong password in and whatever, you're losing lots of money, you're losing lots of time, and you're not really getting people on board with your security culture and your security aim. So what do we need to do is kind of make sure this translation doesn't go wrong. Like your engineer knows, this HMI is throwing a timeout because there's a fakey RTU in the middle that might not send the data. So they're thinking something physical, something device-wise. Your cybersecurity person is like, I see lots of, connections to port 502. Is that a DDoS attempt or whatever? Because that's what they used to, which is fine. But they don't know port 502 is Modbus. They don't know it's a protocol that's being used to operate your OT environment. But likewise, the engineer doesn't know that it could actually be a cyber attack. The guys in Lancaster from Luhac did a very, very good event last year when they did a simulation about something wrong happened in I think it was a nuclear facility, and it was a sensor that was misbehaving. But is the device misbehaving because it's broken? Is the device misbehaving because somebody is tampered with it? That is a legitimate question you have to ask, and you cannot just rule the other thing out. But like what I saw this morning on LinkedIn when Air India, the information got shared. It's a cyber attack, because there's no way these switches could have got flipped. It must be a cyber attack. And that's kind of the culture we're in recently. Everything that happens might be a cyber attack. Oh, it's a cyber attack. And then in the event, it's not a cyber attack. So we need to take a step back, think logically, and make sure that what we're doing is actually not making things worse than better. So we need to, in OT, we're now looking at hybrid roles. So NIST through NICE has released this OT cybersecurity engineer role, which is the bridge between the massive gap that there is between OT and cyber. If you look at what they say the role is doing, it's a lot of translation. It is translating how security helps with safety, how safety is important, and, you have to work together. What your environment is doing, because you need to know what you're doing to secure it well. It communicates to the business what the risks are. It communicates to the business, yes, no, this shared password might be a bad security practice, but we have, these measures in place to make sure we mitigate most of the issues with it. And it makes sure that you don't make decisions that are detrimental to your operational environment and also detrimental to your security. Because we all know if you make security too difficult, people find ways around it. I used to work at a company that didn't allow me to email files over 25 megabytes over email. I had to email a presentation that was like 30 megabytes. Okay. It was Google. It said you have to upload this to your Google Drive and then you have to share the file over Google Drive. Okay, fine. Yes, no, but there's a policy that your Google Drive, you cannot share anything externally with other companies. So what I had to do in the end is I had to log into my own OneDrive account. I had to move that file to my OneDrive account and I have to email it from my OneDrive to the conference because it needed to get there. I was like, it was the morning. I had to give the presentation in like an hour. I needed to get it there. So, finding ways around security is a human nature because you want to make things easy. So let's make things easy. So collaboration between people, between OT and cybersecurity can save the day. It can turn your factory from, a groovy place full of red warning lights, full of people running around hectically, to a very quiet environment where people know what they're doing. They know what they have in place and know what security measures they have in place and know everything they need to do to handle the incident fast, correct, in an efficient way. And then you can get back to business a lot quicker. So if you look at from air gap to panic, if you look at some real world cyber incidents, and I mentioned Stuxnet, which we consider to be the first kind of OT cybersecurity incident. It was like a physical sabotage. So somebody went with a USB stick into Iran, uploaded to the network, slightly configured the centrifuges which wore them out quicker and had an impact on their nuclear program. Very advanced, nation-state sponsored, had to get it physical access. But even though you had to get the physical access, Stuxnet was still found years later on other machines, so they couldn't actually contain it like they thought it would. Then we have Black Energy, which was Russia causing a critical infrastructure blackout. So they managed to get into electricity substations and put tens of thousands of people without electricity. So again, these environments are important. Then we had 2017 Triton or Trisis, the first targeting of safety systems. So the way we look at cybersecurity and OT is we secure, but we always have a fail-back option with our safety systems. If nothing should really be able to go wrong, because I have a safety system that should stop that from happening. But we don't want to rely on that safety system if we don't have to. But this was the first attack that actually targeted my safety systems, which is kind of scary. So we need to kind of think, how do we make sure these safety systems are safe and secure and cannot be overwritten with new logic and will behave as expected. I think there was an oil terminal in the UK. When was it? Might have been like 2005 or long time ago, way before I got to the UK, that exploded because the safety systems were not in active mode. They were like in like is it like a development mode or something? So they were not actively stopping incidents from happening, and the place went boom. So, important. 2091, we had Alzheimer Water, where somebody managed to get into a water treatment facility using TeamViewer and could potentially have released chemicals or more chemicals in the water as expected. Luckily, even in those scenarios, we have backups. There's only so much chlorine I can store in a tank. So there's only so much chlorine I can put in the water. And there's other systems and filters and tests. But it is quite scary that somebody might be able to do that. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a report of a water dam, hydroelectric dam in Norway, having been targeted in April because they had their HMI, which is the interface that an engineer uses to operate their PLCs in their environment. It was accessible from the internet, so somebody found it through Shodan, or somebody found it through Census, and it had the default password. So they logged in with user 123456, or whatever the default password for that device was, and they managed to up the minimum flow rate to like 490 liters per minute or something. Okay. In the end, no big damage was done. You would expect people will see that it's a physical thing. If I'm there and see like, that's a lot of water coming out of this pipe, maybe something is wrong. Well, no, it took them 4 hours to realize somebody did that. Which is, again, training, culture, be aware that something's happening. And we see more and more of these attacks. And not just attacks on our infrastructure, but because our systems are now connected with the IT systems, ransomware on IT renders our OT infrastructure useless. We saw it with Colonial Pipeline attack. It was not an OT attack, but they chose to voluntarily shut down the pipeline because the billing system didn't work. And if you cannot bill people, you cannot sell them anything. So all these independencies that people don't know of, that people don't appreciate, are actually affecting our daily lives. But not everything is doom and gloom. So because we're panicking about these things, because we're seeing hacktivists and nation states more and more interested in these environments, it does lead to progress. We have that new OT cybersecurity role by NICE. We have, Immersive started doing OT cybersecurity training. We have lots of companies send us OT cybersecurity training. We have lots of UK companies that are doing OT cybersecurity because we all understand that it is something we need to get right. And if we get it right and we modernize our legacy OT infrastructure and we can have all the benefits that new technology gives us, we can do so much more with our environments. Like, I love seeing those Boston Dynamic robots, like how they dance and do whatever. Like, that is cool things. And I want to be able to do that in, my environment, but I want to be able to do it securely. So if you take 4 things away from my pictures accompanied by my rant, is don't trust the outdated air gap security methods. If you're in OT, or if you find someone that's in OT and he says, we have an air gap, don't tell them, don't trust it. Don't trust it in IT as well. Bridge communication gaps, and that's something that is as true for OT and for IT. Communications. Build multiple security layers, defense in depth. Same thing in OT, same thing as IT. But we need to do it in a way that works for OT. And invest in the people, because they are your best defense. Like, you might have the best tools and technology if your people cannot operate it, or your people find ways around it, or your people click on that phishing link. They're all moot anyway. So invest in people. Don't let them go. And invest, don't give them this like information security training that's like a slide deck and 5 questions. Make it actually so they sit through it. Because lots of the people I talk to, they say, I went through this at 5 times speed and I guessed the answers and I passed it. So, invest properly in your people. So are there any questions? I'm not sure if I missed some, but don't ask me any of these, please. Yes.
So I now realise I actually work in OT. And Do you think, is anyone considering the idea of, rather than treating it as an informational problem where, we have this network and you can access everything across the network, and therefore we have to apply IT defense methods to that? It seems to me that you've got an issue here where you've got three levels of threat. You've got someone can get into their PLC and program it, so then they can do anything. The next level up is someone could get into like the HMI interface and, as you say, try flooding the system with chlorine or something. They haven't reprogrammed the PLC or changed that in any way, but they're able to, at the operator level, give harmful instructions. And then at the third level, people want data, but there's no reason for them to have access to those latter two, to those earlier two levels. So you wanted to get data out of the network. If you had, is anyone discussing, for instance, having a read-only data protocol? So with Modbus or something, you're at level 2. You can change. You can't reprogram things from Modbus, but you can change like how much chlorine gets sent. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me, I feel that's basically, I feel we've connected into networks, so now everything is accessible.
Yeah.
Is anyone having a discussion about, like, because the best security I ever saw was someone had, we're going to send you just the data over a serial cable. With a serial cable, you don't have connection to all the other ports on the PLC.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I'm nowhere, and perhaps I don't see that much security landscape working in one company, but nowhere am I hearing anyone having that discussion about, we've got these different levels of damage that could be done. How do we lock things down? So, arguably, for instance, programming the PLC, maybe you'd say, someone's going to have to go to site and plug into the PLC to do that, and you prevent remote access, because how often? It's not that often, but you need to reprogram the PLC. But it seems to me no one's doing that. Everyone is plugging the PLC sometimes into their larger business network, so as like billing accounts can connect to the PLC if you know what it's doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love your question, because that means I actually said what I wanted to say. But that is the issue about what I was saying about the culture and the disconnect between IT comes in and they do their practices with, this is what we're used to do. We're going to block this, do that. But it doesn't work that way. Serial connections, great point. We do have those for like sensors to PLCs and like the Purdue model level 0 and 1. So how can we make sure our environment can keep running in the way it needs to run, but in a secure way? Can we make it so we can program our PLC in a way that changing these values is not possible? That's funnily
made about the chlorine one what made me start thinking this, because that's looking at it and saying, we aren't looking at this as a data problem. How can we make the actual operational machine have its own rules?
Yes, exactly.
But again, I'm not hearing anyone say that. And when you said that, I was like, okay, why not lock it? Why not concentrate on locking down the actual operational kit by designing things like that into it?
Yeah.
Rather than trying to fix the network.
You have people that are doing that, and more people start doing it. And it also links in with understanding your network, understanding your process, So if you know there is a physical limit, like I said, to the amount of chlorine you can put in, because that's what I have stored in my tank. And I have other parts in my process that check that level of chlorine, feedback, and if it's, not clean enough to water, it goes back into the process and gets retreated. So we do have, I think that's often what people forget. We do have these systems that engineers have put in, because another person pointed this out rightly. OT has been tagging along and has been fine for many, many decades. IT is the one we see new vulnerability, new cyber attack, something else happens. But OT networks are designed to be available, reliable, safe. So they have the redundancy, they have the resilience to kind of handle this. And that links into, do we need to stop certain attacks from happening, or do we have other ways to stop the effect from it actually happening? But when you say at the beginning, like, I now know I kind of work in OT, I was talking with somebody at a pharmaceutical company, and I was like, oh yeah, we have the manufacturing, we have OT, and they didn't like understand it until I had that discussion with them.
I think this whole conversation isn't really penetrating the OT environment. They don't know they're OT.
Other question.
I was saying, like, so kind of, you could almost fit in like next gen firewall where it's process aware, so you know it knows that this device has to talk to this device only, microsegmentation. Do you see a lot of that? I mean, it's something that's probably been talked about more recently.
Yeah.
I don't see. I mean, what I've seen, I don't see many of it being in operation. You know, you've got the defense in depth. However, you know, the kind of microsegmentation and the process aware sort of firewalling is probably the easiest way, because at the end of the day, you've got these protocols that need to be essentially unencrypted, so the data is fast, it's, you know, it gets to where it needs to get, rather than trying to secure that data.
Yeah.
That's the point where you want to just create enough layers that device can only talk to that device, and this, you know, that value never should go between this value and this value, and that's where that sort of thing.
Yeah. So we are looking at that, and you have companies that make these industrial firewalls that are aware of these protocols, and we've tested them, and they actually used to at least not work as well as expected, because companies are still kind of figuring out how to do. Yeah. And it's a very difficult environment, because you have your normal operation where one thing talks to another thing, but you might have certain situations where another system needs to talk to that system because things are happening and things need to be changed. But we do have lots of things called data diodes. So single-way traffic, so it can go out, but cannot go back in. So that's good to get telemetry out. And that is kind of what we're trying. So I'm part of the NCSC Committee of Interest for ICS, and I'm in the monitoring and logging expert group. And we made this guidance on how to basically get the logging from your network, because lots of companies we spoke to is like, I don't know how to do that securely. And it's like, yeah, okay, let's not use the normal network, set up an out-of-band network, have some data down that you know data can go out, data can go back in, have certain points where data can go back in, make sure that cannot go to anywhere else, segments, do all of the things that you say. So yeah.
But then I suppose when you've got that firewall, you then rely on that firewall to be very reliable, is the fact that maybe that firewall then becomes a problem. If that has an issue, then the whole system goes down.
Exactly. And people are then, you know, again, your line of defense to kind of put that. I'll just least gonna read this question. If you make exactly, Eric. Okay, is it security or issue of the customers that connect to the network? So it's about customers connect to our network or customers connecting to...
Yeah, so we make... we're a startup where I work. We're making some machines, so I'm an electronics engineer. So a lot of this is kind of like, oh my word, it's like really scaring me. I will sleep tonight.
I learned to sleep very well as well.
But if we make something, at the moment, they're air gapped, they're not connected to the network in our devices, but if we're intending to sell them to customers and they start connecting them to their networks, is that on us? Is that morally our responsibility to put some protection in, or is it down to their network guys? Yeah, that is a good question, and we see that a lot. I'm talking with people in the drilling sector, so like these ships. And the ships, one they leave port, they used to be not connected. But now they have vendors that come in and they're like, oh, we have this little SIM card module that has a connection because we need to get the telemetry in and out and whatever. And that causes potential issues and attack vectors. And it's kind of onto the operator, because it sounds like if you're delivering a secure system by itself, if they integrate it with something else, it's on them to do that securely. We see lots of integrators that come in and give you the most insecure system and then leave, which is on them. But if you deliver a secure system, it's on them to get it to work securely. Thank you.
Yes, you've been waiting.
we're seeing even a lot of quite large manufacturing companies are suddenly realising they've never cared about anything cyber before now, not even for their IT, let alone OT.
Yeah.
And so getting people in to look at sort of ramping up maturity. They don't even have SOCs, don't have monitoring, any of that stuff. So on the OT side, aside from training and building the people relationships, what are your then top 3 things to do if a company goes, oh quick help, with check out our OT, give us some top tips?
Yeah, so actually I wrote a blog on this for my company last week, but I kind of but the first thing I always say is map your network. Know what you have. If you don't know what you have, you don't know what is connecting. If you talk with, again, I was talking with bus company and train companies. They come in with these machines that connect to a remote network. If you don't know that, you can go nowhere with security. So know what systems you have and what they're doing. Know what connections are coming in and are going out of your network and what you actually need. But probably the most important thing is, and we call it the crown jewels, know which systems are your most important systems and bolster them before you kind of go out and know what relies on each other. Is that answering your question?
Thank you. Really good.
Tom, did you?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay.
No, it was me with an answer to the gentleman that's the electronics
Oh.
engineer.
Yeah.
I would say if you're building it to go outdoors, would you consider putting an IP case on it? IP67 case on it. You would always make sure that the electronics physically, your things were suitable for the environment.
No, not outside. They're not.
No.
Yeah, as an example.
Would you?
Oh, right, sorry, I've got you. Right,
So basically,
yeah.
the internet or any networks treat it exactly the same as you would as water and dust protection. If you plug it in,
That's brilliant, yeah.
So I've done secure by design accreditation work for MD stuff. And I'll talk to you more about that as well later. That's the advice I've got for that. I'm also basically consultant.
You have cyber informed engineering that's from is it Idaho National Lab that is kind of coming up. How do we engineer systems to be secure from the design as well? But then teaching engineers to do it securely.
I'm ex-forces, so I don't actually associate with security.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
What do you recommend as a password management solution when you've got, tens of geographically different sites and you've got hundreds of engineers and need access to maybe hundreds of field devices? What do you recommend?
I mean, I wouldn't scare away from recommending little post-it on those machines.
So can I just
come in.
Response to that? So something to consider is your concern making sure that only specific people can log in with no credentials, and you're absolutely sure about the person, or you want to be aware of what goes on. So often you can achieve the goals of your security by making sure you've got adequate monitoring. Because if you can monitor and see people are logging in, and then
some of these devices you might not be able to monitor.
well, if you can't monitor them, then you can still collect the data locally, for example. So you can at least then go backwards from that.
That is an important clarification because it depends on what your risk appetite is and what you want from that system. Like the post-it works fine if you just want that password on there so that people cannot just go on it from the network, but physically when they're there, they're there. There is arguments for getting an Active Directory in your OT environment if done properly, if you're required to do so. There are tools and systems there. We have those now secure remote access devices that are kind of VPNs and you need to log in on them to get into your OT network. So there are many ways you can do this and it depends on what you want to achieve. Do I want to know who exactly did this action? You probably need individual user accounts because then you know engineer A has done this.
So
if you don't
part of it is if someone gets access to your level 3.5 or level 3 network,
Is that outside or is it the...
That's
what's the
inside
name
your
of
OT network, the Purdy
Yeah,
model. So 3.5 is your DMZ, and then 3 is your...
So they've just got into your OT network. Okay, you could consider a game over at that point, but you don't want them being able to log into your PLCs, your field devices, etc.
Yeah.
Without enough, like at least if you manage to where you have some sort of unique and somewhat complex password, it would at least have some sort of damage control. Same for like your SCADA system, rather than having it password or something.
Yeah, I need to wrap up, but that's kind of a good point. We used to do pen testing for OT, and people said once you get into it, it's game over, but that's not the case.
So when you pen test with OT, and obviously you've got to give the recommendations to targets to systems to top over.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hope it was interesting. Thank you.